Hello, beautiful witches. Welcome to Successful Witches, our podcast for indie romance lovers and writers, where we are fucking obsessed with spice, smut, and happily ever afters. I want to welcome in you all to this space with my dear friend and fellow smutty book witch, Nicole Middleton, who is going to be a regular guest appearance on this podcast. And I am
Wow.
so fucking excited. Welcome, Nicole. Say hi to everyone.
Well, hello there. I'm trying to put on my most sexy late night DJ smutty voice, but I'm just going to get way too excited and squeal.
I know we're recording this at like 8 o'clock at night and it's dark because it's winter here in New Zealand. And
Mm,
it feels very much like a late night radio like talk show or
yeah,
something.
getting down and dirty late at night. Ooh.
After dark with successful witches.
Ooh. Fucking love it.
And
I'm so excited. My smile is just ear from ear, and I'm just like, "Ee, let's just get into it."
I know we've been plotting and scheming these episodes for us to get together and share all about our favorite spicy, smutty book recommendations. That's going to be the whole vibe of these segments that we do on the podcast. Basically, to give you all the context of how this started, is basically Nicole and I started sending spicy book recommendations to each other and screaming at each other in WhatsApp messages about how much we love these books. And then it evolved into Nicole's been an amazing beta reader for me. And it's just
Mhm.
grown from there. So we kind of decided we really should just fucking get together and record our conversations.
Yeah, we decided that people need to hear these conversations, that these conversations are that good that we cannot keep them to ourselves. Not only were we talking like real serious author stuff, but there was a lot of real purple devil emojis and a lot of wet emojis.
A lot of
And
water
there's a lot of
droplet emojis.
water droplet emojis. Like there's a lot of good stuff that the world needs to hear about. So we are doing everybody a service.
Exactly. So basically, we are going to come in here and we're going to share our favorite reads, our book recommendations. Basically, anything you hear about from us in this space is something we've read and that we fucking love and that we're
Mhm.
obsessed with. And so these are not going to be book ratings or anything like that. Just trust that anything that we come and talk about in here, we're raving about it because we've read it and we fucking love it. And we
It's
want
a
you,
full body fuck yes.
yeah, and we want you to add it to your Kindle, your TBR, whatever it is you've got going on. It is our recommended read for you to enjoy and to dive into because that's what we do.
It's life changing. Get ready, peeps.
So, for our inaugural Successful Witches episode that we are going to do in our book recommendation, we are starting out with probably the book that cemented our smutty, spicy, book loving friendship.
Hmm.
Would you say, Nicole? Was it the very first book that we kind of traded on?
Well, yeah, exactly. I think you said to me, "Have you ever read these kinds of books?" And I was, let me just be honest. I don't know what world I was living in, what rock I was under, but I was still reading young adult. I'm not a young adult. I'm a middle-aged adult.
You're a
And I
big
was still
kid. You're a
I'm a
big
big
kid.
kid. I am a big kid. Yes, that is true. But I also want the fun adult stuff. And I was getting kisses at the end of a 300-page book. And I was like, oh, this is so frustrating. And if you'll get to know me, I am not a slow burn type of person. So while I enjoyed my young adult dystopian and fantasy novels, absolutely fully. I did not know that this world existed until about 4 months ago when Rose introduced me. And then I was like, oh my fucking God, this is the new Nicole.
And then I nearly tortured you to death by getting you to beta read my book, In Darkness Waits Desire, which is a steamy slow burn. And
Yeah.
Nicole almost died in the process of reading that book.
Yeah. The comments and the voice notes back and forth. I was like, Rose, what
Yeah.
is happening?
when
Why
when
haven't
are
they
we
done the
getting?
deed yet? Come on. She was like, it's a slow burn. I'm like, fuck slow burns. I want them to do it now.
So we are coming in not with a slow burn at all. We are coming in with a fast burn to kick things off with our recommended read for this episode, which is a book entitled The Warlord Wants Forever by our queen of steamy paranormal romance herself, Kresley Cole. Bow down, everyone.
Round of applause.
And this book is book one in the Immortals After Dark series. If you're not familiar with this series at all, it is a rabbit hole. I can't even remember how many books are currently in the series now, but it is.
I think it's 19.
It is a very extensive series of standalone but interconnected, and it is just a world that keeps on growing and expanding. Each book focuses on a different couple, and it's just so good. It is so good. Anyone?
Yeah, I'm so excited about talking about this book being one of my first, which is just if you could choose anything to be one of your first, these are some of the best books out there. I mean, I'm probably going to say about that about every book that we talked about because, like we said, it's either a no or we fucking love it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be start becoming like one of those girls that are like, oh my god, I love this song. Oh my gosh, I love this book.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
My favorite. But no, seriously, one of these books just are the gift that keep on giving. Like I love that it's such a long series, but even just starting off with Mist's book. Oh, did I jump ahead?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
This is my
There's no
favorite.
spoilers. There's no spoilers. Yes,
No spoilers.
this is book one in the ongoing Immortals After Dark series. And it's actually a very perfect kind of intro, not only, I guess, for our first book we're talking about and recommending for you to give you a little taste tester, dip your toes in the water, because it's a quick read as well. It is much shorter
Too
than
quick.
yeah. I know. Kresley, go back and like elaborate, please, for us all.
We need some more, please.
It's much shorter than a lot of the other books in the series. So it is a very quick burn, beautiful, fast read, spicy as all hell introduction to the world of Immortals After Dark. So to kick us off, we are going to start with a little quote that I'm going to read for us that Nicole here picked out as one of her favorite moments in the book, which is actually when we first meet our main characters. Which should we talk about our main characters first, or do you want to dive straight into the quote? We want to set the scene first before quote, or do
yeah,
quote?
let's set the scene and then they'll really feel it. Let's set the scene. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're starting off with this quote just because it's so powerful at the beginning of the book. It really literally sets the scene for this couple's relationship. And in the first couple of pages of their relationship, Nikolai is on the battlefield. He is waving his sword around, his real sword, not the other one. Get your mind out the gutter, guys.
We've got dick jokes already. I love it.
So he's waving his sword around. He is killing vampires left, right, and center. And he never takes his eyes off this woman in the window. And she never takes her eyes off him. And there's this powerful moment where at one stage he is literally off the side cutting a vampire in half and he's still got his eyes on her. And I'm just like, this intensity is just chef's kiss. Ooh. And so that's basically the intensity of that moment. And then he rushes in and finds her sitting at the window and they start this conversation, which Rose is going to get into.
Yeah, so I shall try and do Kresley Cole's beautiful writing justice here. So this is at Mount Oblak Castle in Russia. If the overgrown vampire didn't stop staring at her face, even his wicked talent with his sword wouldn't keep his head upon his shoulders. The thought made Mist, an immortal known as the Coveted One, grin as she curled up on the windowsill of her cell, leaning against the reinforced bars. She watched the two vampire armies battle below as she might a rumble from the back of the bleachers. The poor
Mhm.
warlord, with his broad shoulders and jet black hair, was about to join a legion of other males whose last sight on earth was her smiling face. He frowned when he ducked and ran through his enemy. He was a big male.
Mm.
I love Kresley's words. He was a big male, at least 6.5 feet tall, but he was surprisingly fast. Tilting her head, she studied him. He was good. She knew
Mm.
fighting and liked his style. Dirty.
Yeah.
He'd cut with a sword, then strike out with his fist, or duck a parry, then throw with an elbow. It amused her to watch, but what she wouldn't give to be down there fighting, in the middle, against both sides, against him, she fought dirtier.
Ooh.
And like that is just the best opening to a book between a couple that are, yeah, that
It's
sums up
perfect.
Mist and Nikolai in just the most incredible way, because
Yeah.
Mist is what's known as a Valkyrie within the Immortals After Dark world. Do
Mhm.
you want to just quickly give us the Nicole 2-second rundown on what a Valkyrie is, or
Yes. Oh my
what you
gosh.
love? Because I know you are obsessed with Mist and the Valkyrie.
Yes. That's as like some of my most favorite things. But so the Valkyrie are a group of immortals that essentially the first one, what happened was this human person was in battle, and just before she died, she cried out, and she was so courageous that Freya and Woden woke these gods. They woke up and they said to themselves, that was really courageous. That was a beautiful act of courage, even though she's going to die. Oh, no, she didn't die. Hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself. They'd bestowed her with this magic, and she had a daughter. And now
Mm.
this daughter became the first Valkyrie. And then over millennia, every time this happened, it didn't have to be a human, but it could be fae or vampire or any type of person from the immortal lore.
Mm.
And they were essentially bestowed with this courageous act, and they had a daughter that would be Valkyrie. So the Valkyrie actually bring together a lot of the lore people because they're mixed blood, basically, which I find so juicy and so beautiful.
And they technically have three parents. So it's this
Mm.
strange kind of mix of magic and supernatural gifts and humanity. And
Yeah.
they're very even though they are central to the Immortals After Dark world that Kresley Cole writes,
Mhm.
they're also not very well known in terms of other supernaturals.
Yes.
Little bit like, oh, who are
Mhm.
these creatures? You know, they've got claws, but they've also got tiny fangs and also got pointed ears, and they don't
They've
know a
also got
lot about,
strange powers.
yeah, they don't know a lot about the Valkyrie. So they're this badass group
Mysterious.
of mysterious women who
Mm.
are very, very powerful and very fierce. And this is kind of part of Mist's character, really, isn't it? That she is this bombshell who
Mm.
plays kind of the helpless, defenseless
Damsel.
damsel that
Yeah.
then turns around and basically cuts your head off.
Yeah. I just love that power though. That the way they're described as well. I think the the juxtaposition. Oh, I'm just going to stop with that word.
Miss, what are you doing to us?
Oh, Kresley, you got me all hot and heavy right now. Um, the juxtaposition. I can't even do it.
Juxtaposition.
I'm gonna have to switch to another word. Anyway, the paradox between the paradox between how small and beautiful and dainty
Mm.
these women are to how powerful they actually are is so beautiful, and the way that they play with that duality in them is great, because just like normal women, they're underestimated so much in these novels, and it makes me laugh quite a bit when people are like, but hang on, you're this little dainty damsel in distress. And especially with Mist being put in these situations where she is literally played as a damsel to fool people, and then she's just like, whoosh, you know. you guys are fools
Yeah,
for believing that.
blood spurt, body on the floor, and she walks
Quick
away
as a
kind of
whip.
like buffing her nails, you know,
Yeah. It's
more
just
or less.
the imagery is just beautiful. So I think that play with that power and the way Kresley does that is just absolutely incredible. And this is why I love Mist as well, because she walks in there and she absolutely uses that dark feminine energy. She knows she's powerful. She knows she's gorgeous. And she uses that so magnificently because she's been doing this for millennia. She's been used as bait for millennia. So even in that first scene, when she like shimmies her way down from the window, where she's been like so beautifully, silhouetted by the window, and she shimmies her way down and she makes her way to the bars, and there's not a hint of fear in her, which confuses Nikolai because she's firstly tied up, well, in behind bars, and she's just so calm and so sultry and sexy. And he's like, what's happening here? And she's just stroking the bars and asking him his name. And it's just so beautiful and slow. And he's like, who are you? What are you? And she's just asking her own questions like, you don't get to ask me questions. I ask the questions. I'm in power here.
Yeah.
It's just
And
beautiful.
as it turns out, she knows everything about him and his kind
Mhm.
as vampire kind. And he knows jack shit about
Yeah.
her or anything about supernaturals
Yeah.
because Nikolai Roth, our male main character, our swoony vampire in
Mhm.
this book, he was turned as from being a human. So he's not a born vampire. He was turned as he lay dying in a war, whenever it was, I think like century ago, a couple of
Mhm.
centuries ago. I can't remember. Anyway, he'd lived his regular life as sort of a peasant
A
at the time,
warlord.
but then became a warlord, and his family were farmers and things. And as he kind of
Mhm.
lay dying in the field of battle, he was saved and turned, but like struck a bargain with the vampire that turned him that was all about him being able to protect his family and being given time to protect his family who remained as humans. And
Mhm.
that's actually one of the things that interestingly draws Mist in and makes her kind of start fancying him in a way because she's like,
Yeah.
wow, you were a human literally dying and a vampire was standing over you and you had the balls to bargain.
Lay your terms. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and I think there's also something in there about she knew of him as a human, I think, because Mist
Mm.
has been around a lot longer than Nikolai has, and
Yeah, so
I
there'd been
believe,
stories about him
yeah,
because
she'd
he
heard.
was already in the war, and he had just
Mm.
as a I think that the courageousness is something that all Valkyries that piques their interest. So there'd been lots of stories about Nikolai and how he handled war and having all those war stories. But yeah, it's quite interesting because there's obviously, not obviously, we're going to discuss this, but there's two factions of vampires, and
Mm.
these are the two factions that are fighting against each other. So there's the factions of, is it the forebearers that
Mm.
were humans that were turned, and they've got these real strict, um, like a code that they live by,
They
whereas
don't
this
drink
other
human
faction,
blood.
they don't drink human blood
Yeah.
at all,
Mm.
to keep by their law. So they're strong and they've taken everything on that vampire and immortality gives them, but they don't do the bad stuff like drink human blood. And then there's this other faction that go the complete opposite way and they drink humans to death. But
Mm.
there's actually how there's obviously a lot of badness to that as well. So there's a little bit of an in between, which comes out in the books as well, which is, I
Mm.
think one of the biggest themes here is about understanding people and immortals on a little bit of a deeper level, and then finding those threads that we can actually fall in love with.
Exactly. That it's sort of you've
So
got
juicy.
vampire against vampire, and they're technically the same thing. And
Mhm.
just which end of the morally grey compass are we on today, basically? And that's what I love about Kresley Cole's world and her Immortals After Dark world is that you've got these incredibly sexy, steamy, erotic relationships and scenes and things going on, but then you've got these massive overarching themes around morality and light and dark and power, and yeah, it's so good. It is so good. So we've got another little excerpt here from actually the scene you were just talking about, Nicole, when they first kind of actually come face to face. And this is when Nikolai is on the outside of the cell where Mist has been captured previous to him arriving at this castle. So she had been captured by the bad vampires. And he kind of wanders up to her cell because he's obviously very taken by this beautiful creature that's been sitting staring at him while he was on the battlefield below. So, what are you? Nikolai Roth demanded again, surprised his voice was steady. When he'd seen her in the light, he'd felt like exhaling a stunned breath, if his kind respired, for she was strikingly lovely, with a beauty only hinted at from the distance of the battlefield. He'd been attracted to that face to his reckless peril. Though she had expected him to recognize her kind, all he could determine was that she wasn't human and that he hadn't a clue what she might be. Her ears said fey, but she also had the smallest fangs. Free me, the creature said. Flawless skin, coral pink lips, flame red hair. This is like bombshell standing in front of him. The eyes that flickered over him appraisingly were an impossible green. The way she held the bars was suggestive.
Love her painting this picture because I can just see it.
Like stroking the bar.
Like, hello there.
Everything about her was suggestive. Swear fealty to my king and I will free you. I can't do that, but you've no right to keep me here. And I love this moment because this is also a signature Kresley Cole, is the banter between characters is fucking fantastic. And we've got a moment here where one of Nikolai's brothers, who was also turned into a vampire, wanders past this situation. And this is just the most perfect little moment that Kresley Cole writes in. His brother Murdoch passed by them, raised his eyebrows at Nikolai's discovery, and muttered in Estonian, "Sweet Christ." Then he walked on.
Oh, this is brilliant as well because it's just like there's a hint of, Nikolai not normally being
even interested in a woman.
Yeah. He's not taken by anyone. And why is he spending time on anyone or anything? And then the brother walks past and goes, "Oh yeah, no, I get it." Like, so we know how intense this moment is, and we know why he's taking all of this in, because clearly Mist is just that big an energy.
Yeah, and I just love that it's this "Sweet Christ," and he just walks off.
Well, I think that's the theme of this book, Sweet Christ.
Yeah. It is so good. So, what else can we, I could rave all day about this book, right? But I think one of the things I love about Nikolai, particularly in this book, because of course we love a broody, possessive, grumpy male main character,
Why do we love this? When you're saying it out loud, I'm like, why do we love this? But we do. Like, I think that's both of our partners, isn't it?
Yeah. What red flags? But essentially Nikolai at this stage is dead. He's vampire dead. Like, he's just a walking vampire robot warlord. He doesn't breathe, he doesn't respire, he has no heartbeat, he has no kind of bodily response. So
he has no sex drive.
Yeah, he can't even get hard. Like, there's nothing going on for him. And the only way that vampires such as him will have that moment when everything comes back to life for them is when they meet their fated mate, which in this case, in the Immortals After Dark world for vampires, they call them their vampire bride, which is quite a funny term, because it essentially is like grates the fuck out of the Valkyrie that this is a term they use, because it's so possessive and demeaning in their eyes. You know, they're like, ugh, your bride, ugh, you know,
Yeah.
strong ass women are just like, no, I
Yeah. Feminists
refuse.
to the core.
Yeah.
And then they're like, the bride, really? Is that all we are?
Yeah. And so then Mist comes along and royally fucks up Nikolai's world, because once they get close to one another, she brings him back to life. She is his bride.
Mm-hmm.
And she realizes this and totally plays him,
Mm-hmm.
because her Valkyrie sisters turn up, and Mist has basically been more or less dry humping him in the corner of her cell, to the point where poor Nikolai, who has been body dead for however many
Yeah.
centuries, is now hard as a rock,
Blooded.
is blooded, is completely lost his mind, with like overwhelmed with all of this returning
Senses
emotion
and
and
yeah.
senses and lust and all the things. And he's basically about one stroke shy of coming in his pants.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Miss
And she
literally,
disappears.
she literally jumps out the window.
Talk about some blue balls.
And does, because this is the process within the Immortals After Dark world, is that once this happens, it is only the vampire's bride who can elicit
Service them.
yeah, who can elicit the release.
How many innuendos do you think we can get in this podcast?
We're doing well. We're doing really well. And so therefore, she literally leaves Nikolai for 5 years.
This is it blows my mind. I can just, I do feel for him at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
I do. Like
And
before
this
I
is
was like, yeah, go Mist. And then I'm like, oh, shame.
yeah,
5 years is a long time.
yeah.
Like maybe
So
not an immortal time, but for them, I'm like, whoa.
it's a long time to basically be rock hard and needing to come, which is more or less what happens to poor Nikolai. And he has to suffer through 5 years. The next chapter then picks up 5 years later, when Mist is kind of like thinking about her mystery vampire and a little
Mhm.
bit feeling bad, but going, oh, well, he's never going to find me. Oh, but hang on a minute. Before I jumped out the window, as I was kissing his face off, I happened to nick my tongue on his fang by accident,
Accidentally.
which gives him access to my memories. So
Mm.
Nikolai eventually figures out where Mist is, comes for her, literally comes after her, and then comes.
Yeah. It's so there's so much to this book. I mean, we said in the beginning, it's a small book, but there's so much depth to it. So even though we've just given you a little bit of a rundown of the vibe and some of the first chapters, there's so much in not just this book, but all of Kresley Cole. There's this deeper layer, like
Mm.
Rose mentioned, about these deeper themes running through, which I think are really, really beautiful. And Rose and I have spoken extensively about these deeper layers. And one of them is the fact that there's this power struggle between the two characters. And it's so beautiful. And, we get into it because I don't know if we're going to spoiler alert. I don't know. I need to like wink it. But
Are you talking about the chain?
yeah.
I think we can quickly cover it. I think
Okay. Do
we,
you
we
want to
won't
talk about the
spoil it.
chain then?
We won't spoil it too much, but there is big power dynamics in this book around the fact that Mist has this magical golden chain around her waist that
Mhm.
essentially has been given to her. I think it was because she kind of got a bit like naughty and did something she wasn't supposed to with someone at some point in time. And I think the
Basically like a
gods,
chastity belt, but like a pretty
yeah, the
chain
gods
that
gave
makes her
her
look
this
even more
just
sexy,
a
if that was
mystical
possible.
golden chain. But basically, whoever is in possession of this chain controls Mist. So up until now,
Mm.
she has worn it around her waist. She's had total autonomy, total control over herself. She's even tried to cut it off, and
Yeah.
nearly sliced herself in half, thanks to all their Valkyrie shenanigans that they've done to try and get this mystical chain off. And basically after this scene where, you know, they finally, Nikolai chases her down. And actually, one of the things that we wanted to point out here is the power dynamic thing is that she genuinely thinks that Nikolai is going to like pin her down and rape her. Like that's what she genuinely thinks is going to happen, because she's like, oh shit, he's mad.
I blooded him.
Yeah, I blooded him and then I abandoned him.
Ran.
He's gonna be really pissed, and he's just gonna go full psycho vampire on me. But he doesn't, because Nikolai is actually a very kind and
Nice
loving and caring man, a vampire, and he just essentially uses the skin contact of, I don't even know if he uses her hand. I think he just kind of like rubs up against her or something, just like asks her to hold still, or I don't know, but it's something very kind of, you know, he does it in the most,
remember actually.
Yeah, he I think he kind of does it in the most polite way possible.
Yeah.
Which surprises her, because she genuinely thought he was just gonna attack her and rape her. And
yeah,
and so he finally gets his release, and they kind of end up arguing, and as she's trying to get away from him, I think he just sort of reaches out and snags the chain, and it snaps
like a normal chain would, like a little delicate little chain.
And she can't believe it, because she's literally spent centuries trying to hack this thing off her body. Nothing would do it, no matter what, you know, she tried. And he just literally had to hook her finger around it, and it broke apart. And now he's in possession of this golden chain, which means he can control Mist. And he quickly figures out that he says stop, and she physically cannot move. And so he literally has magical power control over her body, everything she does. And this goes into the whole power dynamic between them that is part of the reason you and I both love this book so much, because
this is, yeah, exactly. This is something that we spoke about quite a bit, is that this power dynamic, and how, you know, we're reading fantasy novels here. So there's this world that we get to put ourselves in and play with these dynamics that maybe, or maybe we don't know, are we playing with in real life, right? So it's just such a beautiful thing, because sometimes a lot of the books that Rose and I read, and a lot of the books that we are going to be recommending, are that dark romance kind of genre. So there's a lot of themes in here that do get a little bit dark. And that's also some of the power dynamics in this book that Kresley Cole touches on, is those, what did we call it? The dodgy consent.
Yeah, like dubious consent, right?
Dubious consent, yeah.
You're dealing with characters that are inherently morally grey at best, and
Which
just
is beautiful
outright
in a fantasy, right?
Yeah, and just outright psychos at worst. You know, they're murderers and like, you know. I think once you get to Lothair is the book where he genuinely is a bad guy. And I actually listened to an interview with Kresley Cole where she said that she had a big sign above her computer as she was writing that book, stuck to the wall, that said Lothair is the bad guy. Like, she had to keep that in mind the whole time she wrote that book, because she's like, he is not a good guy at all.
And we still fall in love with him.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
how does she do that?
Happily ever after. But you know, you're right that these books kind of explore things and themes that are not real life. And this is part of why you and I both love smutty, steamy romance so much, because it gives us a way to explore things in a safe way. And it gives us a way to consider things that you never would in normal day-to-day kind of life or conversation.
100%, yeah.
And it's so, I really love that you mentioned before about like the dark feminine energy, because that's something that is really, you know, been so kind of trained out of women for so long. And these books particularly are the kind that are going to give you like those real tasters of what it's like to not only be like a badass female, but also like have these male main characters that are possessive. And they've got flaws, and they've killed a fuckload of people
or vampires or other things. But that was one of the things that we wanted to touch on this book, and just a little bit of a trigger warning for not just this book, but some of the other Kresley Coles, because we know there's been a lot of hate around that So if dubious consent is something that is a hard no for the readers
Yeah.
here, then this is probably not where you want to go. But we wanted to touch on it because we love the whole happily ever after. And I feel like that's where we give this a little bit of liberty because it's hot and sexy and beautiful because we do know there is a happily ever after. We do know that these people do trust each other eventually and they do fall in love eventually. So this is where we love dubious consent when there is trust and there is love and everyone is agreeing to it. And obviously, in fantasy, we know they're doing that at some point because we know we're going to finish the book and they're going to fall in love and everything's going to live happily ever after. And it's going to be amazing. So, this is why we're like, hell yes, for dubious consent. In real life, we love dubious consent when we know there's trust and love.
Yeah, we're not comparing these books to real life by any
Yeah.
by any stretch of the imagination. And
Yeah.
as I say, that it's always good to go into anything we talk about in this space or whatever with just if you know what your limits are, if you know what you're not comfortable with, like absolutely take that into account first and foremost. And we'll try our best in these episodes that we do together to just kind of guide you and give you a bit of a taste, or at least link them up in the show notes around kind of what the main triggers or whatever are to just be considerate of when we're reading.
Because there will be some triggers, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
Some of them will be beautiful triggers that will leave you in a puddle, others not so much.
Yeah. And you're so right that big part of why I love this book particularly is that both characters go on such a massive growth arc in terms of their journey. And actually this was our third quote that we wanted to share as part of this. I don't even know if we can call it like a book recommendation. Is it just like us raving like lunatics about
a book raving,
like,
a rave.
Book raving.
Should we just say book rave?
So this is at a point in their, you could call it relationship, where Nikolai is now in control. He's got the chain.
The situationship.
Yeah, the situation. He is in control. He is holding the power, but he is also allowing, Miss to. We're not doing the shower. We're not doing the shower scene. We're not doing the shower scene.
Okay. I needed to just prepare myself.
Shower scene people.
We're not going to spoil that. Yes, good point. Because you need to be in a very safe place for that shower scene. I can't even speak thinking about the shower scene.
It's Nicole's favorite.
Give me all the shower scenes, please.
But this is essentially at a stage in their situationship where he holds the power, and he has also made it very clear that Mist has to come to him. He will only ever ask her to do things like stay in the house. He's not going to force her to do anything sexual. He's not going to force her to do anything that she does not want to do. He is just
again building that trust.
Yeah, and I think a really great metaphor for giving people the confidence to explore something. And that's what he does really beautifully in this book, is that he gives her the confidence to explore something that she has been told vampires are a no-go. We kill vampires. We do not fall into bed
with Mist.
Yeah. And so she's going against like all of her Valkyrie family training, everything. So this is a scene that I think is really, I love it because it's sexy, but it's also really cute between them. He basically takes Mist's words and throws them back in her face. So his hands reach out to pile her hair up just so he could lean down and breathe along her neck. At her ear, he murmured, "Bride, this is embarrassing. I think I've caught you staring at my cock." Which is almost exactly, I can't remember what it is that Miss says, but it's more or less he flips her words around and just shoves them back in her face of what she has said to him, making her quiver. She'd teased him in the same way when his eyes had been riveted to her neck so many years ago. That's right. I think she says, "This is embarrassing. I've caught you staring at my neck," or something like that. It's like, for him, it was the blood, and for her, it's I want what's in your pants.
I want to drain that vein, baby.
This is descending into chaos. Absolutely appropriate for our first episode.
Mom, do not listen to this podcast.
Yeah, yeah. Please, thank you for sticking around with us. In a sensual rumble. God, I love it when a male main character has a sensual rumble to it.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah. He added, "You like it, don't you?" When the question sunk in, her eyes went wide with disbelief, the spell broken. How could he ask her that when she would be forced to answer? Because this is, again, everything he says to her or asks her, she has to answer.
Mm-hmm.
His lips hovering over her shoulder, he said, "Answer me honestly." And then in her mind, she answers, she doesn't say this out loud, "I want to curl up between your legs, rest my head at your hip, and draw you over into my mouth to taste you for hours." She almost said, then negotiated her mind into another honest answer. "It's too big." Kresley Cole, you are just a genius because she brings
She is a
so much
genius.
fucking humor into her books, and I love them so much. Like, they make me laugh so hard.
It's fantastic. It absolutely it blows my mind. So these books, I mean,
Yeah.
even we'll touch on just going into the future a little bit, but even one of the books that I didn't think I liked, I ended up loving. I pushed through a couple of things. I was like, I don't know if I like these characters. And oh my God, it probably ended up being one of my most favorite books as well.
Do you remember who they were?
Yeah, that was
there are a lot of characters, but
the demon and the OCD. What's her name?
Holly and Cade? Is that
Yes.
Holly and
Oh
Cade?
my
Yeah, yeah,
gosh, how hot
yeah.
were they?
Actually, I remember you messaging me and like WhatsApping me going like, "I don't think I can get on board with Holly. Like, I'm not
I'm
enjoying
just not her
Holly."
vibe. The
But
OCD
yeah,
thing, I'm just not
yeah.
aligning. And you were like, okay, that's okay. You can come back. And I was like, I'm just going to push through. And then I pushed through. And holy Jesus, what was it? Sweet Christ.
Sweet Christ.
Sweet Christ, I'm so glad I pushed through. So we'll get to those books as well. But yeah, like I said, even the ones that I didn't think I'd like, I absolutely loved. So
And that's a real skill that I think comes through in these books time and time and time again, that there can be very unlikable elements to these characters, and yet we can still go on a journey with them, and we can still explore with them, and we can still enjoy that. They might not be our cup of tea, but like the pairing and the
the
dynamic.
dynamic between them. And also that I love how, because I find as well in real life, often the whole theme of opposites attract is actually a real thing. And in these books, it really is like that. And you like, how would these two people get together? It makes no sense. They're not alike at all. They're so vastly different. But then you can just see how they come together and just like a puzzle piece and just fit. Like they don't complete each other in that sense of the, being not enough, but they just walk hand in hand. It's just beautiful. But you also touched on the points that I wanted to talk about as well, as this overarching theme of not accepting these other people. So this runs through the entire series as well. And it's really coming to a point that through the books and through the series, the more we understand about the characters, the more we fall in love with them as a reader, but also the characters in the books as well. So it's really quite beautiful because they're not just these people on paper that we've heard about, like the vampires as a group of immortal beings and the Valkyrie as a group of immortal beings and everybody else from the lore. There are these individual people that we can fall in love with, and the characters soon start to realize that, like Mr. Nikolai, she doesn't need to love all vampires, but she loves Nikolai. And it's the same theme that keeps coming up, that these are real people and they've obviously got good, they've got bad, but we get to understand them and see them for who they truly are and start to fall in love with them. So I'm just like, oh, that theme just gets me.
And it sets up beautifully one of the books that comes after it, which is essentially goes into the fact that one of the Valkyrie who has been taken in is actually a halfling vampire Valkyrie. And it was a big deal when they took in this little baby Valkyrie girl and then realized that she was half vampire, and she's actually a rare little precious thing, and all the Valkyrie have like grown to love her and become like her pseudo mum, and aunts and look, dote on her. And so that's part of Mist's whole like rationalizing the fact that she's been told forever to hate all vampire, no matter who they are.
And now she loves Emma. Is
Yeah,
it
and
Emma?
now, yeah, Emmeline is, she loves her to pieces.
Niece,
And
basically.
then, yeah, and then now she's got this big hunky vampire man who she wants to get on her knees for,
Oh,
basically, at every
gross.
opportunity. So to wrap up this very
Sexy.
yeah, very sexy episode of that we have been delighted to come in hot with some Kresley Cole business.
I'm gonna go read it again. I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to. I have to.
Let's do a very, very quick why we're obsessed. Why we're obsessed, Nicole. Why we're obsessed.
I'm obsessed with Mist because she is the first entry to this whole world. And Kresley Cole really builds this entire world. Like with every book that she writes, she builds more of the world that you can just get into and into and into it. And it's kind of I can imagine it like one of those maps on a PlayStation game where you get just to the edge and then it opens up a little bit more and you're like, oh my word, how much more is there to this entire world? And then you know that there's 19 books. And if you read as fast as I do, it's very, very anxiety driven when you know there's only 3 books or 4 books, and you're like, I'm coming to the end. Whereas this has got 19 books. So I'm like, yes, I've got more of this beautiful world that I get to explore. And I think I'm only on book 7 or something. So I'm like, like a little kid.
You've got a
But
lot to go.
Mist, yeah, I've got a lot to go. But Mist is my absolute favorite because she's who I fell in love with in this series. And even when she comes in a little bit through the other books, it's just that pure dark feminine energy where she uses her sensuality and her sexuality for in this real powerful beautiful way, and she can be all the things. There's no one thing or the other. She's powerful and soft and sensual, and she will also like slay a motherfucker, like all. I just love her. She's beautiful, and like she is my alter ego. Like, please, Daddy Universe, if I can come back one
Yeah.
day, like let me come back as Mist, please.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point. I haven't thought which Immortals After Dark character I would want to come back as. I think for me, off the top of my head, it would be Marikita, who's one of the witches.
Oh yes, I love
Yeah.
her.
I
I
love
love
her.
her. And
And
especially because is it
I also
Lockie?
no,
What's his
she's with Bo.
Oh, Bo.
Um, yeah, Bowen.
Oh,
Who?
he makes my
Yeah,
knees weak.
we have to do a like a
Yes. Oh,
episode. Yeah, let's not get distracted by
yeah.
hot, sexy werewolves
Okay, just quick,
yet.
quick,
Yeah.
quick side tangent. Which are your favorite um section or people of the law
Oh, as like a whole grouping.
as a whole grouping? Yeah.
Hmm.
I want to say the Valkyrie because I mean, hello, but when we look at like the woman and men, like let's
I
choose
know who you're
one.
gonna say. I know who you're gonna say. The sorcerer, the beam, the sorcerer.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Ah.
Well, this is good because I feel like, whoever's listening is that it has to go and read these books now. If
Yeah.
you don't, you are missing out on life. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sad for you.
Yeah. Sorcerer, I really love them. And um I was trying to
Well,
think if there's
actually, I don't
anyone.
think I've got to the sorcerer yet. Is that
Yeah, no, you have because uh in the Cade and Holly book, that's when we first come across them. I think first come across them properly because she does the
oh oh yes.
yeah,
Mhm,
yeah. Sorry
mhm.
for anyone who's listening and is like, what the fuck are you two talking about? But we're just like, we're
You'll
just
get there.
teasing, we're edging you into Kresley
Yeah, we're
Cole.
edgy.
We're edging you relentlessly to go read Kresley Cole like ASAP. So
Mm.
yeah, I think for me it's the witches. I love the witches. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think I need to
My
the
entire
D
podcast is called Successful Witches, so
yeah, I
we know
mean,
we're
yeah, the power there is just
fine.
beautiful. So that this is the feminist in me is like the witches. I just love their the their attitude and stuff, because they are like some of the most powerful. Like I love that power of just being like, these little women that are just so freaking powerful, and the attitude and the money power as well with all those. But um when it comes to the men as well, like the likey.
Yeah. Although my absolute favorite out of all of the men is Trehan. So, and you haven't read him
I
yet.
haven't
So,
I have to get
um,
reading.
yeah, you haven't read him yet, and
Oh
I am
shit.
claiming him forever as my own.
No.
He's a
Okay, we're
vampire.
gonna have to have
So,
some threesome parties, because
yeah.
if he's your favorite, I guarantee he'll be my favorite as well. So,
But very, very closely followed by yeah, the likey. Yeah. Mm,
okay, well, let's leave it
yeah.
there.
Yeah, I know.
Otherwise, people are gonna be like, "What the fuck?" Like, we'll start sharing some beautiful photos as well, of like, I don't know, someone designed some photos of these people. I'm sure someone has already. We can share those.
Yeah, yeah. It's a whole world, and I love it and obsessed with it. We're both obsessed with it. So we are going to be back for another rambling, chaotic,
Mhm.
sexy conversation with our next book review. We're
Do we
gonna
know what that
do
is?
we don't
Or we're not gonna tell
we're
anyone.
not gonna say just yet, but we'll be announcing it very
So
soon. And we'll
excited.
make sure we'll link it up with the show notes of this episode anyway. So if you're watching this in the future and coming to us from the future, you can jump straight to the next episode. This is so good. Thanks so much, my love.
Thank you. Oh,
Can't wait
I
for the
can't
next
contain
one.
myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't wait for the next one. Mwah. Thank you, our beautiful listeners. We'll
Thank
see
you
you
guys. See you
soon.
soon.